When my stepbrother vanished from the hospital on the morning he was supposed to save my life, everyone thought he just got cold feet. They thought he was scared of the needle. But when the police found the strange residue in my water glass and saw his internet search history, the truth hit us like a freight train. He didn't run away because he was scared. He ran away because he was waiting for my life insurance payout to hit his bank account. And the worst part? His plan was already in motion. You won't believe what happened next. Before I tell you how I survived this nightmare, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments if you think family betrayal is the worst kind of pain. My name is Skylar Reed. I'm 27 years old, an ER nurse living in Columbus, Ohio. My whole life has been about fixing people. Car crashes, heart attacks, broken bones. I'm the one who brings people back from the brink. But in a cruel twist of fate, this time, I was the one on the stretcher. The illness crept up on me. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion from long shifts, but when the test results came back, my world collapsed. I needed an urgent bone marrow transplant, and time was running out. My whole family got tested, and of course, the universe has a sick sense of humor. The only match was Ethan, my stepbrother. The one person who has been jealous, irresponsible, and resentful of me since we were kids. When the doctors told him, he had this strange look on his face. "Sure," he said. "I'll do it for Skylar." His voice was flat, empty. It gave me chills, but I had no choice. My life was literally in his hands. It was the night before the transplant. I was lying in my hospital bed, drifting in and out of sleep. Then I heard the door creak. It was Ethan. Visiting hours were over, but he had snuck in. "Just wanted to wish you luck, sis," he whispered. But he wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the monitors and my IV line. Through the fog of my meds, I saw his hand hover over my water cup. "Drink this," he said. "It'll help you sleep." My nurse instincts were screaming at me that something was wrong, but I was too weak to fight it. Darkness took over. When I woke up the next morning, the room was in chaos. Doctors were shouting. My mother was sobbing. I looked at the clock. The surgery should have started hours ago. "Where is he?" I whispered. "Where is Ethan?" The doctor couldn't even look me in the eye. "He's gone, Skylar. Phone off, car gone. He just vanished." At that moment, they thought he was a coward, but they were wrong. As the nurse went to check my IV line, she froze. The tube had been tampered with, and right there on my bedside table was the tablet Ethan had left behind. The screen was still on. He had left my life insurance policy open. The room spun around me as the reality sank in, and I felt like I was drowning even though I was lying perfectly still in that sterile hospital bed with machines beeping all around me. My mother's face went from confused to horrified in seconds when the nurse showed her the tablet screen, and she just kept shaking her head like she could deny what we were all seeing right in front of us. The life insurance policy was highlighted, specifically the section about beneficiaries, and Ethan's name was right there along with our parents, but someone had circled the payout amount over and over again in red digital ink like they were obsessed with that number. $2 million. That's apparently what my life was worth to my stepbrother, and the sick part was that he had been planning this for who knows how long, waiting for the perfect opportunity when he would look like a hero on the surface while actually being my executioner. The hospital security pulled the surveillance footage immediately, and what we saw made my blood run cold, even though I was already feeling like ice from the inside out. Ethan had entered my room at 2:17 in the morning, looked directly at the camera like he knew it was there, then deliberately positioned himself so his back blocked the view of what he was doing near my IV and water pitcher. He stayed for exactly 4 minutes and 32 seconds, and when he left, he glanced back at me sleeping with this expression that I still see in my nightmares because it wasn't fear or guilt or even anger. It was calculation. Like he was looking at a problem he had just solved rather than his sister lying there dying. The police were called within the hour, and Detective Maria Santos arrived with this no-nonsense attitude that somehow made me feel like maybe, just maybe, Someone could actually stop Ethan before his plan worked. She immediately ordered tests on my water glass and the IV line, and while we waited for those results, she started digging into Ethan's recent activity, which is when things went from bad to absolutely insane. His computer search history from the past 3 weeks read like a how-to manual for murder. Undetectable poisons. How long does bone marrow failure take? Life insurance investigation timeline. Countries without extradition to U.S., and the one that made Detective Santos's jaw actually drop. How to make a donor withdrawal look like natural death. My mother collapsed into a chair and started crying these horrible broken sobs that sounded like an animal in pain, and my stepfather, Ethan's biological father, just stood there frozen like a statue, his face completely drained of color. I should have seen it, my mother kept saying over and over. I should have known something was wrong with him. But how could she have known? How could any of us have known that the awkward, resentful teenager who used to steal $20 from her purse had grown into someone capable of this level of calculated evil? The Ethan we thought we knew was lazy and jealous, sure, but this was something else entirely. This was sociopathic, and the worst part was that he had been living in our house, eating meals with us, pretending to be family while secretly plotting my death. The toxicology results came back 3 hours later, and Detective Santos's face told me everything before she even opened her mouth. They found traces of anticoagulant medication in my water, the kind that would cause internal bleeding and organ failure if mixed with my existing condition. And it was the exact same medication that Ethan had access to because our stepfather takes it for his heart condition. The dosage was carefully calculated too, not enough to kill me immediately and raise suspicion, but enough to ensure that by the time the transplant was supposed to happen, my body would be too weak to survive the procedure, and everyone would just think the disease had progressed faster than expected. It was brilliant in the most horrifying way possible because Ethan would have looked like the grieving brother who tried to help, but was just too late, and then he would collect his share of the insurance money and disappear into whatever new life he had planned. But Ethan made one critical mistake, and that mistake was going to be his downfall. He assumed I would die before anyone figured it out. He assumed the hospital would be too busy trying to save me to look for foul play. He assumed wrong. Detective Santos put out an APB immediately, and within 30 minutes, they got a hit on Ethan's credit card at a gas station about 40 miles outside Columbus, heading east toward Pittsburgh. He's running, Santos said, checking her phone as more updates came in. But he's not running smart, he's panicking. Another charge came through 20 minutes later, this time at a fast food place near the Pennsylvania border, and then another one at a budget motel just outside of Harrisburg. He's leaving a digital breadcrumb trail, Santos said with this slight smile. He thinks he's being clever by using cash for most things, but he can't help himself. He's still using that card for little purchases, and every single one is helping us track him. The FBI got involved because it was attempted murder and flight across state lines, and suddenly my quiet hospital room became command central with agents in suits talking in hushed voices and typing on laptops and showing my parents mugshots of Ethan that looked nothing like the boy they raised but somehow captured exactly who he had become. Meanwhile, I was lying there, hooked up to machines that were basically the only thing keeping me alive, knowing that every hour Ethan stayed free was another hour closer to my body, giving up entirely. Because the poison he had given me was still working its way through my system, and the doctors were doing everything they could to counteract it. But without the transplant, I had maybe 72 hours left, possibly less. Then something happened that nobody expected, least of all Ethan. My attending physician, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, burst into the room with this wild look in her eyes that I had never seen before in all my years working alongside her in the ER, and she was holding a tablet with both hands like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Skylar," she said, breathing hard like she had been running. "We found something. We ran your blood work through the National Donor Registry one more time, expanded the search parameters, and there's a match. A perfect match, someone we didn't test before because they weren't in our local database." My heart stopped because I didn't understand what she was saying at first. My brain was foggy from the medication and the poison still working through my system, but then it clicked and I grabbed her arm with whatever strength I had left. "Who is it?" I asked. "Where are they?" Dr. Chen smiled, actually smiled, and said the person was already on their way, flying in from Seattle, and they would be here within 6 hours, which meant we still had time. We could still do this. I could still survive. The FBI agent in charge, a tall woman named Agent Rodriguez, got a call right at that moment, and her entire demeanor changed from calm professional to hunter who just spotted her prey. "We got him," she said, snapping her phone shut. Airport security flagged him at Philadelphia International. He was trying to board a flight to Mexico City using a fake ID, but the facial recognition software caught him. My mother let out this noise that was half laugh and half sob, and my stepfather just sank down into a chair with his head in his hands because his son, his biological son, had tried to murder his stepdaughter for insurance money and was now in federal custody. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in that room that Ethan had been caught at an airport, literally trying to fly away from his crimes, thinking he could just disappear into another country and live off my death money while I rotted in the ground. But here's where the story takes a turn that sounds like something out of a movie, except it's real. It happened to me, and I still can't quite believe it sometimes when I think back on those 72 hours that changed everything. The mystery donor who had appeared out of nowhere, the perfect match that Dr. Chen had found, arrived at the hospital 4.5 hours later, and when they walked into my room, I thought I was hallucinating from the medication, because standing there in front of me was someone I had never met, but whose face I somehow recognized. Her name was Diana Castellano. She was 43 years old, and she looked at me with tears streaming down her face like she had been waiting her entire life for this moment. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Diana sat down next to my bed and took my hand, and what she told me next made the entire room go silent. Even the FBI agents stopped typing and the doctors stopped checking monitors because everyone needed to hear this. 28 years ago, Diana said, her voice shaking, I gave birth to a baby girl. In a hospital in Cleveland, I was 17 years old, addicted to drugs, living on the streets, and I knew I couldn't take care of her, so I made the hardest decision of my life and put her up for adoption. She paused, wiped her eyes, and continued. I got clean 2 years later, turned my life around, became a nurse just like you, and I've spent every single day since then wondering about my daughter, hoping she was okay, praying she had a good life. Last week I saw a news story about you, about how you needed a donor and your stepbrother had abandoned you, and something made me check, because the timing was right and you were adopted and you work in healthcare just like me. And when I called the registry and they ran the tests, Skylar, you're my daughter, you're my baby girl, and I am not going to let you die. The room exploded with noise, my mother crying, doctors talking over each other, Agent Rodriguez making phone calls. But all I could do was stare at this woman, this stranger who was my mother, my biological mother, who had found me at the exact moment I needed her most, like the universe had been waiting 27 years to bring us together for this precise purpose. The chances were astronomical, Dr. Chen kept saying, 1 in 10 million, maybe more, that Diana would see that news story, that she would think to get tested, that she would be a perfect match, that she would arrive in time. It's a miracle. It's an actual medical miracle. But Diana just smiled through her tears and said it wasn't a miracle. It was a mother's instinct. It was the invisible thread that had connected us since the day she gave birth to me, and that thread had pulled her across the country to save my life, because that's what mothers do. They save their children, no matter what. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning, and while I was being prepped, Agent Rodriguez came in with an update on Ethan that was almost satisfying in its poetic justice. He had been transported back to Ohio. He was being charged with attempted murder, fraud, tampering with medical equipment, and about 6 other felonies that would put him away for decades. And when they searched his apartment, they found detailed plans, notebooks full of calculations about insurance payouts and timelines, screenshots of flight bookings to countries without extradition treaties, and a burner phone with messages to some contact named V, discussing how to disappear permanently. But the best part, the part that made even Agent Rodriguez crack a smile, was that Ethan had been so confident in his plan that he had already spent $15,000 on a luxury apartment deposit in Cancun, paid for trips and clothes and a car, all on credit because he was certain that insurance money was coming. And now he was sitting in a federal holding cell realizing that not only had his plan failed spectacularly, but he was also massively in debt with no way to pay it back, and his father had already called a lawyer to completely disown him and remove him from any family inheritance or connections. My stepfather visited me right before the surgery, and I had never seen a man look so broken, so thoroughly destroyed by the actions of his own child, and he just stood there at the foot of my bed, unable to even form words at first. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I'm so sorry, Skylar. I should have seen it. I should have known he was troubled. I should have gotten him help years ago, but I just kept making excuses for him, kept thinking he would grow out of it, and now he tried to kill you. My God, he tried to kill you." I reached out and squeezed his hand, because despite everything, despite Ethan being a monster, my stepfather was a good man who had loved me like his own daughter since the day he married my mother, and none of this was his fault. "It's not on you," I told him. "Ethan made his choices. He's an adult. He knew exactly what he was doing, and now he's going to face the consequences. But you're still my dad. That doesn't change." He broke down completely then, sobbing like a child, and my mother had to help him out of the room because he couldn't handle it, couldn't process that his son had become someone capable of such evil. Diana stayed with me the whole time before surgery, holding my hand, telling me stories about her life, about how she became a nurse, about the daughter she had given up and never stopped loving, and I realized that even though I had grown up with a wonderful adoptive mother who I loved dearly, there was something profound and primal about this connection, this biological bond that had literally saved my life. She told me about the day she gave birth to me, how she had held me for 2 hours before they took me away, how she had whispered promises into my tiny ear that she would always love me even if we never met again, and how she had kissed my forehead and said, "Be strong, be brave, be everything I couldn't be," and somehow, impossibly, I had grown up to be exactly that. "You became a healer," she said, "just like me. You spent your life saving people, and now I get to save you. I get to give you back the life I gave you 27 years ago. And Skylar, I need you to know that this is the greatest honor of my entire existence." The surgery took 11 hours, and during that time, my adoptive mother and Diana sat together in the waiting room, two women who had never met before, but who were connected by me, by their love for me. And according to the nurses who checked on them, they talked the entire time, sharing stories and photos and tears, forming this unexpected bond that would become one of the most beautiful things to come out of this nightmare. My mother told Diana about my childhood, about the first time I said I wanted to be a nurse, about how I used to practice bandaging my stuffed animals and taking their pretend temperatures. And Diana listened with this hunger in her eyes like she was trying to absorb 27 years of missed memories all at once. Diana told my mother about the guilt she had carried, the wondering, the fear that her daughter hated her for giving her up. And my mother took her hands and said, "You gave her life twice. Once when you were 17 and couldn't keep her, and again now when you're the only person who could save her, and that makes you a hero, not a failure." When I woke up after surgery, both of them were there, one on each side of my bed, and Dr. Chin was standing at the foot with this enormous smile that told me everything before she even spoke. "The transplant was successful," she said. "Diana's bone marrow is already integrating beautifully. Your numbers are stabilizing, and barring any complications, you're going to make a full recovery." I started crying, not just from relief, but from the overwhelming realization that I had been given a second chance at life, that I had survived something that should have killed me, and that the brother who tried to murder me had inadvertently led me to finding my birth mother who then saved my life. And if that wasn't the universe's way of balancing the scales, I don't know what is. The story went viral within days because someone from the hospital leaked it to the press, and suddenly I was getting interview requests from every major news network. My phone was exploding with messages from people around the world who were moved by what happened, and the hospital had to assign extra security because reporters were camping outside trying to get photos and statements. I didn't want the attention at first. I just wanted to recover in peace. But Diana convinced me that sharing our story might help other people, might encourage birth parents and adoptees to register as donors, might save other lives the way she saved mine. So I agreed to do one major interview with a local news station that ended up being picked up nationally. The interview aired 3 weeks after my surgery, and I sat there with Diana next to me, still weak but alive, and told the whole story from beginning to end, including the part about Ethan, because I wasn't going to pretend that didn't happen. I wasn't going to protect him or sugarcoat what he did. The interviewer asked if I could ever forgive him, and I said honestly, I don't know. Forgiveness isn't something you just decide to do, it's a process, and right now I'm focused on healing and building a relationship with Diana and being grateful that I'm alive. But Ethan made a choice to value money over my life, and that's something I'll have to carry forever. Diana squeezed my hand when I said that, and she added that while she didn't know Ethan and couldn't speak to his motivations, she believed that sometimes people reveal who they truly are in moments of crisis, and his crisis revealed someone dangerous, and she was just thankful the system worked, that he was caught, that justice was being served. Ethan's trial was set for 8 months later, and in that time I went through physical therapy, returned to work part-time at the hospital, and spent countless hours with Diana, learning about her, about my biological father who had died years ago, about half-siblings I didn't know existed, about medical history and genetic traits and all these pieces of myself that had been missing. Diana moved to Columbus permanently, got a job at a different hospital so we wouldn't be working together but would still be in the same city, and she and my adoptive parents formed this unconventional but loving extended family that supported me through everything. My stepfather struggled the most because he was dealing with the dual trauma of his son's betrayal and his own guilt, and he started going to therapy, really intensive therapy, to work through his feelings, and slowly, over months, he began to accept that he had done his best with Ethan, but some people are just broken in ways that love and support can't fix. When the trial finally came, the courtroom was packed with media, curious onlookers, and family members from both sides, though, notably, Ethan's biological mother had passed away years ago, and he had no other close relatives who wanted anything to do with him after what he'd done. I sat in the front row with Diana on one side and my mother on the other, and when Ethan was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, I barely recognized him because he had lost weight and his face had this hollow, defeated look that was so different from the cocky, calculating expression I remembered from that hospital surveillance footage. He glanced at me once, just once, and I don't know what he was looking for, maybe remorse, maybe fear, but I just stared back at him with nothing, no emotion, no reaction, because he didn't deserve my energy anymore. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, showing the evidence, the search history, the poison in my water, the insurance documents, the flight attempts, and with each piece of evidence, the jury's faces grew harder, more disgusted, and Ethan's defense attorney, a public defender who clearly knew his client was guilty and was just going through the motions, could barely mount any kind of meaningful defense. Ethan's lawyer tried to argue that he had been under financial stress, that he wasn't thinking clearly, that he panicked and made terrible decisions, but the prosecution brought in a forensic psychologist who testified that based on the evidence, Ethan's actions showed clear premeditation, planning, and a complete lack of empathy or remorse, which suggested antisocial personality traits that made him a danger to society. The most damning testimony came from Ethan's ex-girlfriend, someone I didn't even know existed, who took the stand and described how Ethan had talked about me with pure hatred, how he resented that I was successful and respected while he couldn't hold down a job, how he felt like our parents loved me more even though I wasn't their biological child, and how he had once told her, about 6 months before my diagnosis, that he wished I would just disappear so he could get what he deserved. She was crying when she said this, clearly traumatized by the realization that she had dated someone capable of murder, and she looked directly at me and mouthed, "I'm sorry." And I nodded because I understood that she was a victim of Ethan's manipulation too, just in a different way. When it came time for victim impact statements, I had prepared something to read, but when I stood up and faced Ethan, all my carefully written words disappeared, and I just spoke from my heart. "You were supposed to be my brother," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "We grew up in the same house, ate at the same table, celebrated the same holidays, and somewhere along the way, you decided that your jealousy and your greed were more important than my life. You poisoned me, Ethan. You looked me in the eye and handed me water that you knew would kill me, and then you ran away and waited for the news that I was dead so you could collect money that was never yours. But here's what you didn't count on. I survived, not because of you, but in spite of you, and in trying to kill me, you gave me the greatest gift I never knew I needed. You led me to Diana, to my birth mother, to someone who actually loves me unconditionally, and now I have 2 families, 2 mothers, and a life that's richer than it ever was before. So thank you, Ethan. Thank you for showing me who you really are. Thank you for failing, and thank you for giving me a reason to fight harder than I ever have for anything." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, and when they came back with a guilty verdict on all counts, the courtroom erupted in applause until the judge banged his gavel for order. Ethan showed no reaction, just stared straight ahead like he had already checked out mentally, and when the judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years, I felt this weight lift off my shoulders that I didn't even know I was carrying. It was over. He couldn't hurt me anymore. He couldn't hurt anyone anymore, and I could finally move forward with my life. The months following the trial were a strange mixture of healing and discovery, and I found myself becoming a completely different person than I had been before all of this happened. Not in a broken way, but in a stronger, more aware way, like I had been burned down to ashes and rebuilt myself into something that couldn't be destroyed so easily. I returned to work full-time at the hospital, and my colleagues treated me like some kind of miracle, which was uncomfortable at first because I didn't want to be defined by what happened to me. But eventually I realized that my story was giving hope to patients who were going through their own battles, and if my survival could inspire even one person to keep fighting, then maybe the attention was worth it. Diana and I developed a routine where we had dinner together every Sunday, sometimes just the 2 of us and sometimes with my adoptive parents, and we would cook together and talk about everything and nothing, and she would tell me stories about her past and I would tell her about my present, and slowly we were building something that felt like a real mother-daughter relationship even though we had missed so many years. The most unexpected development came about 6 months after the trial when I received a letter from the prison, and my first instinct was to throw it away because I assumed it was from Ethan, and I had no interest in hearing his excuses or apologies or whatever manipulation he was trying now. But something made me open it, and when I read the first line, I realized it wasn't from Ethan at all. The letter was from Ethan's cellmate, a man named Marcus Chen who was serving time for white-collar crimes, and he wrote that he felt compelled to reach out to me because Ethan had been talking in his sleep, saying things that Marcus thought I should know about, things that suggested there was more to the story than what had come out at trial. My hands shook as I read further, and Marcus explained that Ethan had been having nightmares, reliving moments from our childhood, and in these nightmares he kept saying, I'm sorry, she didn't deserve it. He made me do it. He said it was the only way, and Marcus had pieced together from these sleep-talking sessions that maybe Ethan hadn't been acting alone, that maybe someone else had manipulated or coerced him into attempting murder. I immediately contacted Agent Rodriguez, who was now working on other cases but agreed to meet with me, and when I showed her the letter, her expression shifted from skeptical to intensely focused within seconds. This changes things, she said, because if Ethan was being manipulated or blackmailed by someone else, that person is still out there, potentially dangerous, and we need to figure out who they are and what their motive was. She requested permission to interview Ethan, and surprisingly he agreed, Maybe because he was tired of carrying the secret alone, or maybe because 15 years in prison had given him time to think about what he'd done, and he wanted some kind of redemption. But whatever his reasons, he finally started talking. What he revealed was so twisted and disturbing that even Agent Rodriguez, who had seen some of the worst of humanity in her career, looked shaken when she came to brief me and Diana about what she'd learned. Ethan confessed that about a year before my diagnosis, he had gotten involved in illegal gambling, racked up enormous debts to some dangerous people, and when he couldn't pay, they threatened to kill him unless he found a way to get them money. A lot of money. Fast. He had panicked and started looking for solutions, and that's when he met someone online, someone who went by the name Victor, who claimed to be a financial consultant but was actually running an insurance fraud scheme. Victor had analyzed Ethan's situation and identified me as the solution, explaining that if I were to die, the insurance payout could solve all of Ethan's problems and even leave him with money to spare, and Victor would help orchestrate everything for a cut of the proceeds. Ethan swore he had resisted at first, said he couldn't kill his own sister, but Victor had been persistent, planting seeds of resentment, reminding Ethan of every time I had succeeded where he had failed, every time our parents had praised me and criticized him, every scholarship and award and promotion that I had earned while he struggled, and slowly, methodically, Victor had transformed Ethan's jealousy into justification for murder. The FBI launched a massive investigation into Victor's identity and discovered that he wasn't just running one insurance fraud scheme, but an entire network of them across multiple states, convincing desperate people to kill their relatives for insurance money and then taking a percentage of the payouts. And in cases where the perpetrators were caught, Victor would disappear and start over somewhere else with a new identity. They estimated he had been involved in at least 15 deaths over the past decade, maybe more, and tracking him down became a top priority for the Bureau. Agent Rodriguez told me that without Marcus's letter and Ethan's confession, they might never have known Victor existed, and I realized that even in prison, even after everything he'd done, Ethan had inadvertently helped save other potential victims by exposing this predator. It took another 8 months of investigation, surveillance, and coordination with international law enforcement, but they finally found Victor, whose real name was Vincent Aldrich, living in a luxury apartment in Montreal under a fake identity and still running his schemes remotely through encrypted communications. His arrest made international news because the scope of his crimes was staggering, and during the investigation they found evidence connecting him to dozens of suspicious deaths, and families who had been grieving what they thought were accidents or natural causes suddenly learned that their loved ones had been murdered for money. Vincent Aldrich was extradited to the United States, charged with conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, fraud, and a list of other crimes so long that his trial lasted 6 weeks, and I was called to testify about my experience and about how his manipulation of Ethan had nearly cost me my life. Sitting in that courtroom facing Vincent Aldrich was surreal because he looked so ordinary, just a middle-aged man in a suit who could have been anyone's accountant or financial advisor, and that ordinariness was terrifying because it meant that predators like him could be anywhere, looking like nothing special, while destroying lives for profit. When I testified, I didn't just talk about what happened to me. I talked about the ripple effects, about how my stepfather still struggled with guilt and depression, about how my mother had developed anxiety and trust issues, about how Diana had been robbed of the chance to know me for 27 years, and our reunion, while beautiful, was tinged with the tragedy of what we'd lost. And I looked directly at Aldrich and told him that he didn't just target individuals, he destroyed entire families. And for what? For money that he spent on expensive cars and vacations while people died and loved ones suffered. He never showed any emotion, never looked sorry or ashamed, just sat there with this blank expression like he was listening to someone read the phone book, and that lack of humanity was more chilling than any display of anger or regret could have been. Vincent Aldrich was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and the judge, an older woman who had been on the bench for 30 years, said in her closing remarks that she had never seen such calculated evil, such complete disregard for human life, and that she hoped his sentence would send a message that people who profit from orchestrating murder would be punished to the fullest extent of the law. Ethan, who had cooperated with the investigation and testified against Aldrich, received a reduced sentence of 18 years with the possibility of parole after 12, and while some people thought he should have gotten more time, Agent Rodriguez explained that without his cooperation, Aldrich might never have been caught and more people would have died. So in the end, justice was served even if it wasn't perfect. Now, 3 years after that nightmare morning when Ethan disappeared from the hospital, I'm healthier than I've ever been. My bone marrow transplant was a complete success, and Dr. Chen tells me that my numbers are so good that I'm basically in permanent remission, which feels like a miracle every single day. Diana and I have built an incredible relationship, and she was there when I got engaged to my partner Alex, who I met during my recovery, and who has been my rock through all the legal proceedings and media attention and emotional processing of everything that happened. My adoptive mother and Diana are genuinely friends now. They go shopping together and text each other memes and celebrate holidays as one big blended family, and my stepfather, while he'll never fully recover from the betrayal of his son, has found some peace through therapy and through focusing on the family members who are still present and loving. I think about Ethan sometimes, wonder if he ever truly feels remorse or if he just regrets getting caught, and I've come to accept that I'll probably never know, and that's okay because my healing doesn't depend on his redemption. I wrote him one letter after Aldrich's trial, not to forgive him, but to tell him that I was moving forward with my life, that I was happy, that I had found love and purpose and a relationship with Diana that enriched my existence in ways he could never understand, and that while I couldn't forget what he did, I was choosing not to let it define me anymore. He never wrote back, and I don't expect him to, but putting those words on paper and sending them felt like closing a door that needed to be closed. The story has had ripple effects I never anticipated. The interview went viral and inspired thousands of people to register as bone marrow donors. Diana started a non-profit organization that helps birth parents and adoptees connect and navigate the complex emotions of reunion. And I've been invited to speak at medical conferences about the intersection of family dynamics and healthcare ethics, turning my trauma into something that might prevent others from experiencing similar situations. The hospital where I work has implemented new protocols for donor verification and patient safety that include background checks and psychological evaluations for family members involved in transplants, because my case revealed vulnerabilities in the system that needed to be addressed. Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, Alex sleeping peacefully beside me and Diana's text message on my phone saying, "Good night, sweetheart," I think about how close I came to dying, how many tiny variables had to align perfectly for me to survive, and I feel this overwhelming gratitude that borders on religious even though I'm not particularly religious, because the odds of Diana seeing that news story, getting tested, being a perfect match, and arriving in time were so astronomically small that it really does feel like fate or destiny or whatever you want to call it intervened. And then I think about Ethan sitting in his prison cell, about Vincent Aldrich in his maximum security facility, about all the lives they damaged and destroyed, and I feel sad, not for them, but for the version of reality where none of this had to happen, where Ethan could have just been a flawed but decent person who got his life together, where Vincent Aldrich had used his intelligence for good instead of evil. But that's not the reality we live in, and all I can do is make the most of the second chance I was given. If there's anything I want people to take away from my story, it's this. Family isn't just about blood or legal documents. It's about who shows up for you when you need them most, who fights for you, who saves you, and sometimes the people who are supposed to love you will betray you in ways you never imagined possible, while strangers or long-lost relatives will move heaven and earth to keep you alive. Life is fragile and precious and can be stolen in an instant by people who value money more than human beings. But it can also be saved by unlikely miracles and the determination of people who refuse to let evil win. I survived because Diana chose to search for me, because doctors and nurses fought for my life, because law enforcement took my case seriously, because a cellmate felt compelled to write a letter, and because I refused to give up even when everything looked hopeless. 3 years later, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. I'm living a life that Ethan tried to steal and Vincent Aldrich tried to profit from, and every morning when I wake up, I think about how I almost didn't get to see this day, and then I get up and I go to work and I save other people's lives, 'cause that's what I was meant to do. That's who I am, and no one can take that away from me ever again. Ethan is in prison, Vincent Aldrich is in prison, and I am free, truly free for the first time in my life, free from the weight of family dysfunction, free from the fear of betrayal, free to build a future with people who genuinely love me, and if that's not the ultimate victory, I don't know what is. So to everyone who has followed my story, who has sent messages of support, who has registered as a donor because of what happened to me, thank you. Because you've taken my worst nightmare and helped transform it into something meaningful, something that honors the second chance I was given and hopefully prevents others from going through what I went through. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts on family, betrayal, and second chances. And remember that no matter how dark things get, no matter how hopeless the situation seems, there is always the possibility of a miracle. You just have to hold on long enough to receive it. My name is Skylar Reed. I'm 30 years old. I'm an ER nurse in Columbus, Ohio. I'm a daughter to two incredible mothers. I'm a survivor. And I'm here to tell you that sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up leading you to exactly where you need to be. And that's the greatest revenge of all. Not hatred or anger, but simply living well, living fully, and refusing to let anyone's cruelty diminish the light you bring to the world.